So then we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Israel from the time of the great prophets of Yahweh. So then we can understand the time of the end and Revelation. And lots of political situations going on around the world, political unrests, and lots of decisions to be made in the near future, and is coming to a point where then the Chinese system is most required in order to stabilize the entire market of the world. And there are many indications from the prophecies, starting then with Yirmiyahu, the 61st chapter, regarding then the time of restoration. There are many aspects involved during this time of restoration, and some of them are very critical, pointing of nations in conflict. Regarding the prophecy, as we understand, there is a gap of time where the nations should rebuild and then should develop, and a gap of time of peace. These must be then activated, and understanding from the viewpoint of the Messiah, he gave us in the 24th chapter of Yirmiyahu, the first gospel, from the 6th and 7th verses, we find then the gap precisely where then Yirmiyahu 61st chapter fits. The Messiah always spoke in layers from times and seasons, as then obviously the other prophets would do. They explained always in layers of understanding so people could relate and explain, and then nations would come to Jerusalem and would understand the times and the seasons via these layerings. Because Israel, back time of Shimon, they would give directives to the nations as they would inquire of Yahweh, and Yahweh obviously always speaks to times and seasons. That's why he created the prophecies in these situations. So then, understanding what's going on around the world, the Chinese system, it's most important because it stabilizes the market. There are nations emerging with lots of financial powers, and those they are stagnated in a specific area. When the Chinese system is then implemented, they can invest these resources in areas of production. Obviously there is lots of Chinese people even returning to their own homeland because they're going to increase the production a lot, and it's going to require a whole lot more people. However, the preventing of this point is the U.S. military and our foreign policies yet preventing this system. It's going to work against us. Because Yahweh has decided then China is going to lead the world's market, and then our military must retrieve. There are already factors and indicators of what the Messiah spoke in the 24th chapter of Yirmiyahu, speaking of then earthquakes and then disasters in many areas. We are already experiencing many types of cyclones lately, and then it's increasing our expenditure a whole lot more. Indicates that we should retrieve from the world, and then requesting the Chinese patrols and then starting their system. Any person with a basic understanding of Yahweh's prophecies can understand the time of the end, reading from Revelation. The Chinese market is the stabilizer around the world because they can invest, the peoples and nations can invest in the specific areas of the market, and then brings a stabilization. That's why then the Chinese system was chosen. And then if we do not retrieve our military from the world and our foreign policies, it's going to work then against us. Because at some point during the next 40 years we're going to experience our market then reducing and reducing and reducing, because we are not producing anymore. We are spending more than we are producing. The natural fact, if you study history, is for then the ruining of our economy. And when the economy then is threatened, the next step is absolutely sure privatization. The agencies are going to be junked. They're going to find private sectors to take over those forcibly. There are no choices. Any government in trouble during financial times, they must privatize. The only way we can stabilize for the moment is retrieving our military and cut the expenses. If we decide to maintain them both, we're going to ruin our economy, and then we're going to be forced of then privatizing the agencies. If a person doesn't understand economics, the way it works, they can't have them both. In fact, the best for our nation is retrieving our military, adjusting then the foreign policies, having the Chinese do patrols, and then yet do the privatization. These would increase our economical values. Without those, we are set for ruin. We can't have our way anymore without evaluating the consequences. And since most people don't understand the factors related with Revelation, read the 8th chapter. This country is for many years working blindly. We can't anymore conciliate what we spend versus what we produce. It's going to ruin. We are not going to force the world our ways. It's a mere theory that we can use our military to force the world our way. We can't do it anymore. Our value, our monetary system does not match anymore what we produce. And the time is not yet. It's going to work against us. Let's read what then the Messiah said regarding this. It's not my word or yours or then anybody else in this world. It has a relation with the words of Yahweh. And the 24th chapter of Mitzvah then explains very plainly. So then the Messiah is explaining what's going on. He was at the Mount of Olives, and then obviously the people, his own countrymen, want to make him king. Is the whole concept of the 24th chapter. That they were in temple, they were reading and studying, and then when he departed, then his people showed him then the niceties of the city and so on and so forth, and they began to try to make him king, because he was then the king, but not what they were thinking. Then the Messiah was speaking of nation would rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and shall be famines and plagues and earthquakes in many places. But these are only the startings. Then they would deliver to many situations. They would hate because of his name. Then many would stumble and would then betray each other. Many false prophets would come and arise and deceive many, and because of the growth of iniquity, the love of many would grow cold. What he was saying is this. The translation properly from the Messiah is, many then would not encourage each other anymore in the ways of Yahweh. Stay in the path of Yahweh. This is what it means. But then from the 6th and 7th, for you are bound to hear of revolutions and rumors of war. And then the 5th, for many would come in my name and would say that the person is the Messiah when it's not, and would deceive many. So then, for you are bound to hear the revolutions and rumors of war. Watch out, do not be disturbed. He is speaking of the set apart. He is speaking of Israel. If Israel remains obedient, they should be watchful. For you are bound to hear of revolutions and rumor of wars. Watch out and do not be disturbed. For it is required that these must take place, but it is yet not the end. So from the 6th and 7th, there is a gap over there. Then it fits Yirmiyahu, the 61st chapter. Time of restoration. Where there is a gap of peace where the nations would rebuild. Because in the 61st chapter, it states, then the cities returning, and this is precisely where we are at, the cities of Israel are returning, the holy cities. Then later the city, meaning then Israel, would be restored and the temple refurbished. And then preparing the world for the vengeance. In the spirit, this is what should be doing in terms of then the regular understanding of the market of the world. Gentile rulership, we must point them to China. And the people of Yahweh always should point the people back to the instructions in terms of divine understanding and point to China as then the ruler of the Gentiles. Because there is a relation with the market. The nations around the world are going to be doing trade with China. The system must be implemented very fastly because it's a market stabilizer. They have the most powerful industry on the planet, and that's why they should have this, in quote, belt of trade around the world, because it regulates the market in terms of the flow of resources. There are nations very depleted. They must have the certainty of the market, and only the Chinese system can provide. That's why they were chosen to be the leader of the end. And every time there is a prophecy taking place, then there is a specific market taken over. For instance, during the time of Daniel was Babylon. And we are during the time of restoration. That's why the Chinese system then is prominent. The Chinese system is used around the world to stabilize the world's market, so then restoration can be then achieved. And then speaking of earthquakes, and then famines, and then another cyclone came to our country. It's going to deplete our resources even further. So then he's given us then the clues that we should retrieve and let the Chinese start implementing their system. And obviously starts then with the Middle East requesting their patrols. So then the market can start stabilizing itself. When the entire Middle East observes then Chinese ships coming through and then enforcing security, then the natural fact is then returning to trade, diplomatic trade. And these would help the entire world to be sure that they would invest their economies properly. And only the Chinese system can provide. And as far as U.S., we must retrieve. It's a time of retrieval and a time of rebuilding. Our economy won't last very long in this pace. What has hold our lack of understanding is yet the monetary system, and it is failing. So then when the Messiah was speaking, he was giving directives, and he also spoke many of his words related with stabilization. There were more and many others types of prophecy the Messiah then he did explain. Those were not recorded because the Messiah was hated. Any kind of a manuscript found from the people of the law after his ascension were destroyed because the Messiah was not received. However, he was the Messiah, and he then implemented what then Yahweh had him implemented. And there is no way out for our country other than retrieving and adjusting our economy. And privatization is a must. It's going to take place, like it or not, because we are not producing enough of what we are then spending. We can't maintain our printing out of paper. It won't last for very long. Another 4 years and our economy is ruined. And then before it's turning down, then obviously they're going to get rid of the agencies. It's an absolutely must. We can't compete with China. The stories of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., it's baloney. Absolutely baloney. It doesn't come. It won't come. It's not profitable. Try to understand, you yourself with investment money in an economy that is absolutely not yet strengthened, you're not going to invest your money in finding factory in the U.S. You buy the product already cheap. The only way out of it is making sure we come up then with new technologies, such as making the best compact computer to take on then the Chinese system when it comes. Because a whole lot more people, they're going to buy computers. Nations in development, they're going to buy the computer by the thousands. But then we have to put away our mighty and high nation. We are not anymore. We are a broken country. But then they are kind of forcing themselves, and then it's going to break. Only evaluate economics. The natural fact is by the next term, by the second year of the next term, we are already going to experience privatization of most of our agencies. That's the truth of it. Nobody's going to lie. Our manufacturing is not going to improve. And pushing China back is against the scripture, then turns against us. The more we try to stabilize in our own ways, the worse it gets. Because we can't maintain the world system anymore. Only China can do it. But these are natural facts. Only people that are very stupid, only stupid nation does not observe these signs. We have to come to our senses and understand economics. We were taken over for years from fables and weak understandings, but this time came the end. Either we refurbish properly, or then by the mid of next term, then we have to privatize. We are not producing anymore, because the time is not yet. What the Messiah was speaking was, there is a time of then wars, rumors of wars, and then the nation of Israel were to be obedient to the Messiah, because he's speaking of enlightenment of obedience. If they are obedient to what the Messiah is speaking, they should not be concerned with it, because the time is not yet. And understanding what goes on, we must retrieve. There is no other option. Either we retrieve, or then we ruin. But the retrieval then is going to save our country. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.